Hello friends, today in the series which we are doing on history of India from 1700 to 1950, we'll talk about militant nationalists or the revolutionaries. In the earlier lecture on the same theme, we talked about that how the militant nationalists or the revolutionaries played an important role in the national movement in terms of their individual heroics, in terms of the various secret societies which they established for the cause of the freedom of India, where they realized that the British oppression was the single most factor which was in a way oppressing all the Indians, and the kind of treatment which was being given to the Indians, the kind of cruelty which was inflicted by the British on the Indians, which created all sorts of discontent among the general population. And militant nationalists, they realized that the politics of the moderates and the extremists will not be able to bear that kind of fruit, and that is how their idea with regard to attack the British officials, to assassinate them, to loot the British treasuries. So all this was in a way done by them in various societies like Anushilan. All of them, they also played an important role. The various people, those who were associated with these kinds of societies in the underground activities, they wanted to create this kind of a kind of a consciousness among the masses. And we also find that apart from Bengal, in other regions, the revolutionaries, they were also very active. And especially in Maharashtra, for example, we find that the kind of contribution which was made by Chapekar brothers and V.D. Savarkar, all of them, they definitely played an important role in terms of raising the consciousness of the masses, engaging in the various kinds of activities. Apart from that, we also talked about that in foreign countries as well. Beginning from Shamaji Krishna Varma, where he established the India House, and many leaders, those who were from the revolutionary section, they were also there in London supporting him through their acts and activities. In the similar vein, when we talk about the other kind of a movement which was not in India, but it began its journey from outside, especially North America, Gadar, for example, which was on a Hindu in a Urdu or a Punjabi word, which means the revolt or the rebellion. So in that sense, we find that these people, they were from the ranks of the Punjabi immigrants, those who were settled in North America. And the Gadarites, they also realized that how they have to provide support to the people, those who are in India. And they felt that they will not be able to achieve any kind of prestige, any kind of reputation in the foreign countries if their country will not have any kind of a reputation of their own in India. So in that sense, they wanted to liberate India so that Indians, they have some kind of a self-respect within India. Then only their condition or their situation will improve there. And we find that how they were in a way discriminated at that point of time, and their enslaved position when it was seen vis-a-vis the British in India. So their status was considered to be low in nature, and they in a way felt that how they can organize themselves to improve their situation in India, and how India could be free from the colonial clutches and the racial British government. So British government in that sense was exploitative in nature. Its approach was racial in nature. They wanted to in a way treat the Indians in a manner where they did not want to provide any kind of respect to them. They considered their situation was enslaved in that sense. And the people, those who were there in the Gadar movement, they also realized that they have to initiate some kind of a body or an organization. And Lala Hardayal, a political exile from India, joined their cause in USA. And we find that in 1913 they established Hindi Association in Portland, which was later called as Hindustan Gadar Party, which was there in San Francisco. So we find that this kind of a body which was initiated by them in 1913, we find that how people, they were ready to support this organization in terms of money. They also realized that they had to send people from here to India to mobilize themselves against the colonial rule. And one of the important aspects of this movement was that people, they could realize their own self-worth, and they also were trying to communicate in the framework of a unified kind of a system where we find that this Ghadar party would function. They also started a newspaper or a weekly with the title of the Ghadar, and how it also wanted to disseminate the information which was concerning the Ghadar movement. We find that when this body was established, and leaders like Sohan Singh Bhakna, who was elected as the president of this body, and Lala Hardayal was the first general secretary, and decisions, they were being taken to establish a headquarter by the name of Yugantar Ashram. And when this newspaper titled Ghadar, it was also established for free circulation as well. So such kind of a body definitely played an important role at that point of time. They also sent people from USA to India to propagate the ideas of Ghadar. Ghadar definitely meant revolution, and they borrowed from the 1857 rebellion as well, because that was also seen as some sort of a Ghadar. And when you talk about the kind of ideas which were being seen in the newspapers, etc., we find when these people, those who started this party, the Ghadar party, they said that they started Ghadar in the foreign lands, and we find that some kind of a war was in a way launched against the British, and this war was in the context of Ghadar. And what they wanted to do with regard to this issue was that they wanted to engage themselves in the Ghadar, and where they wanted to begin this Ghadar was in India, and how they felt that the rifles and the blood will take the place of pen in that sense. So they wanted to supply the arms and ammunitions to the masses in India, so that they take up those arms and ammunitions and fight against the colonial rule. And when one is talking about the kind of newspaper which was started by them, it was on the masthead, it was written Angrezi Raj Ka Dushman, an enemy of the British rule. And it also declared that it wanted the brave soldiers to stir up rebellion in India, and the people, they should be ready to pay, and if they were ready to pay, the death would be the kind of payment which they had to make. And the kind of price which was demanded was the martyrdom again, and the pension was the liberty, and the field of battle was India. So we find that Ghadarites, in that sense, they in a way understood the situation of India and how they were trying to mobilize the masses in India as well as in USA, and how people, those who would be mobilized in USA, they will be asked to go to India with the kind of support which was required by the Indians to in a way fight against the colonial rule. So when we talk about the Ghadar and the kind of ideas which were associated with Ghadar, we find that they wanted to in a way create some kind of a patriotic attitude in the young Indians of those times, that they should be in a way trained to fight against the colonial rule. And when you talk about that how the newspaper which was started by them, then they wanted to expose the British rule, the kind of activities in which British engaged themselves, and they talked about the negative consequences of the colonial rule. So their patriotism was in a way reflected in a manner in their activities, and where they wanted to secure some kind of a freedom for India. And they also realized that British, they had to be overthrown by an armed revolt by them, and they asked the people, those who had come to USA from India, to go back to India and propagate these ideas among the soldiers as well as the common or the ordinary population of India. And this kind of a feeling in which they realized that Indians would only be able to attain some kind of prestige or some kind of a reputation abroad when they will achieve their independence. And we find that their poems, they were published in the newspaper Ghadar, and they were later published in a collection called Gadar Ki Goonj, and they were also recited at various gatherings as well. And when we talk about the kind of other activities, we find that the leaders, those who were in the offshore lands, they definitely made all sorts of efforts where the mobilization of masses in India could be undertaken, and the people, those who were living in America or in other regions of the world, they in a way contribute in their own manner. So we find that an Indian Independence Committee was established with the outbreak of the First World War. Lala Hardayal and the others, they went to Germany and established the Indian Independence Committee at Berlin. And the committee planned to send volunteers to India to incite rebellion among the armed forces and to provide explosives and to invade British India to secure independence from the colonial rule. So we find that they had a broader kind of an objective, and the kind of planning which engaged had broader objectives as well. And they wanted volunteers to visit India so that any kind of a rebellion among the armed forces could be initiated in India. They also wanted to provide all sorts of armaments to the Indian revolutionaries, because they realized that Indians, they were short of armaments. They did not have the resources, the kind of money to purchase the armaments. So when they will be equipped with these armaments, then they will be able to fight the British in a proper manner. And we also see that they wanted to invade the region which was captured by the British, because if they will capture those regions in which British they had their rule, then definitely the British rule would be weakened in those regions, and they will be able to throw the British out of India. We also see during this particular period one important incident, which was the Komagata Maru case, which produced the explosive circumstances in Punjab. And it was the case where we find to challenge the Canadian immigration laws, which forbade admission to everyone, excluding those who made a direct passage in their ship. And one of the persons called Gurdeep Singh, he chartered a Japanese ship, Komagata Maru, and with nearly 400 Indians, he sailed for Vancouver. So it was an attempt where we find that such kind of a journey was being made, and we find that the Canadian authorities, they did not allow permission to land, and the ship had to sail back to Calcutta. And Indians, they felt that British had incited the Canadian authorities. So this aggressive approach of the British resulted in some kind of a conflict on the arrival of ship in Calcutta, in which several inmates of the ship died. So when one is trying to assess the kind of activities in which Gadar, the leaders of the Gadar movement engaged itself, and how it was able to create some kind of a positive contribution in the national movement, then we find that how they popularized the nationalist ideology was an important concern of that particular period, where they were trying to analyze colonialism and criticize it, and how the masses, those who were not aware in that sense about the ills of the colonial rule at that point of time. So they did not just only want to, in a way, create this kind of a consciousness among the Indians in India, but at the same time we also find that they were doing it abroad as well, and the ideas of Indian poverty and backwardness, how they were the result of the colonial rule, they were also being in a way popularized among the masses, so that if India wanted to come out of poverty, if India wanted to come out of the backwardness in which it was there, it was as a result of the colonial rule. And if the colonial rule would be overthrown, then Indians would be able to, in a way, secure that kind of a future for themselves, where this kind of an oppression would not exist. And we find that when it's talking about the kind of ideas with which the Gadar, the people, those who were associated with the Gadar movement, then we find that they were very democratic and equalitarian, and they believed in this kind of an ideology, and they also had some kind of a unified viewpoint as well, when we find that Son Singh Bhakna stated, "We are not Sikhs or Punjabis, our religion is patriotism." So they did not want to, in a way, divide people on the basis of religion or for that matter caste or region in that sense. They wanted to see it in a unified whole, that how these people, they were Indians in that sense, rather than they were of any kind of a religion or caste affiliation. So it was one of the important concerns at that point of time, because India needed at that moment a kind of a unity, and how the British policy of divide and rule wanted to divide the Indians on that basis. So this idea was definitely an important concern of that time. When one is talking about the kind of limitations of that particular period, that how these people, they underestimated the power of the colonial rulers at that point of time, and they felt that the people of India needed some kind of a call to revolt. It was some kind of a weakness in that sense, because they did not realize that despite that call, not everyone could join. And they also felt that Indians were ready for this kind of an assault. So they made this kind of a miscalculation at that point of time, and that Indians were ready to take on the British during that time. And so in that way we find that they overrated the preparedness of the Indians with regard to the kind of fight which would be launched by them. And over a period of time we find that the movement also deteriorated in that sense. The movement withered away over a period of time, and it was because of the various kinds of laws which were established by the British, which were draconian in nature. And British, through their oppression, through their repression, all sorts of laws which were being created by them, we find that they were able to suppress the movement. And we also see that the popular response or the support also dwindled, or rather it did not exist in that sense, also led to this kind of a decline in the revolutionary activity at this point of time. We also see that how revolutionaries, they became active in the later part in 1920s as well, and it was also as a result of the Gandhian politics, where we find that the 1920 non-cooperation movement in a way failed after the kind of withdrawal of the movement after the Chauri Chaura incident. So in this way the revolutionaries, they realized that the current political situation in a way led to some kind of thinking where the ideas were to be revived. And we see that revolutionary activities after 1922, after the Chauri Chaura incident, also it grew in different regions of India. And we find that the socialist ideas and groups, they were also engaged during this time. And we also see that militant trade union movement of the various workers, it also developed in the second phase. So these kinds of new social and ideological forces, they were also at work at that point of time. And we also find that various organizations, Hindustan Republican Association for that matter, or army, and we find that they would be able to realize their objective by getting free, by getting India free at that point of time. And they had to organize themselves in such a manner there where better coordination is between them. And we find that how these revolutionaries, they met at Kanpur in October 1924, and they established Hindustan Republican Association, which was later known as Hindustan Socialist Republican Association, or army, with the provincial units at different places. So we find that how HRA organized the Kakori robbery, and many revolutionaries were tried in the Kakori conspiracy case as well. And we see that in September 1928, HRA was transformed into the Hindustan Socialist Republican Association, or army. Socialism was acknowledged as their official goal. And the leadership of HSRA was swiftly going towards notion of mass-based armed struggle and away from the individual acts of heroism. So they wanted to involve more and more masses in their armed struggle, where people would also join them in that sense to fight against the colonial rule. And we see that in the anti-Simon Commission demonstrations which were happening in Lahore, how Lala Lajpat Rai was attacked and he was killed as well in that sense. So this kind of a blow which was given to him led the followers of Lala Lajpat Rai, Bhagat Singh, Rajguru and Sukhdev, who killed Saunders, a public official or a police official who was involved in the Lathi charge. And how these revolutionaries like Bhagat Singh and Rajguru, they threw bomb in the Central Legislative Assembly on 8th April 1929 with the objective declaring to make the deaf hear. So their objective was not to harm others, rather they wanted to propagate their ideas and they wanted to use it as some kind of a forum for propaganda. And we also see that these people like Bhagat Singh, Rajguru, Sukhdev, they were tried in the Lahore conspiracy case relating to the assassination of Saunders. So their contribution in that sense, where they wanted to use this kind of a forum to propagate their ideas, where they will use court for that matter, the trial court in which they will be able to speak and they will be able to communicate their ideas, why this was an important concern for the Indians was being done. And we also find that during this particular period, some of the revolutionaries, those who were in jail, they also realized that how their status of the political prisoners was not given to them. And when they will be given the status of the political prisoners, then they would be treated in a different manner, because the kind of atrocities which were committed on these revolutionaries were immense. How many of them, they were being not only tried and convicted in various cases, now how the kind of treatment which was being given to them in the jails, how they were being sent to the cellular jail in Andamans, where even V.D. Savarkar was sent. And how so many of the revolutionaries, they were being hanged by them, including Bhagat Singh, Rajguru and Sukhdev on 23rd March 1931. So we find that all these kinds of activities in which HSRA and HRA engaged, they wanted to create a kind of a situation where universal suffrage is there for everyone, and any kind of an exploitation of a man by man is not possible. And we have also seen that Bhagat Singh, before his arrest in 1929, discarded his belief in individual acts of heroism. And he also talked about that how revolution meant arousing population and organizing a mass movement. So in a way, when one is talking about the revolutionary activities, then the idea of national freedom was very, very important. And then the creation of a new socialistic society, as it was being argued by the people, those who were associated with the revolutionary movement. And they were also, in a way, Bhagat Singh was critical of the capitalism and the class domination, and he in a way talked about these kinds of aspects as well. And we also see that the kind of propaganda which was happening in the press at that point of time was also an important concern. And for the revolutionaries, C.R. Das acted as an emotional link between the Congress and the revolutionaries. And when he died, we find that the Congress faction was divided into two, Subhash Chandra Bose and other by J.M. Senagupta. And we also find that revolutionaries, they also divided their loyalties. Yugantar group sided with the group of Bose, while Anushilan group with Sengupta. We also see that various revolt groups, they engaged themselves in different kinds of activities. Gopinath Saha's attempt in January 1924 to kill Charles Tigart, the police commissioner of Calcutta, was another effort at individual heroic action. And after 1926, we find that the younger revolutionaries started to organize themselves into new groups called as revolt groups. So in this sense, we find that these kinds of activities, whether of the Yugantar, Anushilan, all these activities were very important from that point of view. And later we also find Surya Sen's Chittagong group was also an important factor, and we find that some films were also made on Chittagong Armory raid, and one was a Bengali film Chattagram Astagar Lunthin, which was in 1949, and later in 21st century also we find that films, one was Khele Hum Ji Jaan Se in 2010, directed by Ashutosh Govarikar, based on the book Do and Die the Chittagong Uprising 1930 to 34, and another film, Chittagong, was released in 2012, and Manoj Vajpayee portrayed the role of Surya Sen in this film. So how popular literature, as we have seen that, and popular culture, they have tried to in a way communicate the ideas of the revolutionaries, because many times we find that their mention is made in various literary works of that particular period, and at the same time later we find that their portrayal was also being done in films, and how Surya Sen was being treated by the government at that time, how he was being killed as well. And we also find that also women, they participated in large numbers during this particular period, where Pritilata Vadidar and Kalpana Datta, those who were part of the Surya Sen's group. Or we find that Suniti Chaudhary and Shanti Ghosh, they murdered the district magistrate, or Beena Das for that matter, who attacked the governor while she was taking her degree. So the special role which was being played by the women, in that sense, it was also an important concern of that particular period. And we find that the role of the revolutionaries, in the way they were able to inspire the masses, the way they provided the self-confidence and pride to them, and their sense of sacrifice and patriotism, they were being in a way seen by the masses, and how masses, they cherished the kind of activities in which these revolutionaries participated. And with this I'd like to end the discussion. Thank you very much.